This latest chapter of Black Clover sees Asta giving chase to the King of Devils, Lucifero, who attempts to create some space between the two of them by jumping back a bit, from which point he would then raise his two remaining hands, and yeah, I said remaining, because Asta recently cut the other two on his back off, but yeah, with them he would cause much of the nearby debris to suddenly rise up and rush Asta as he drew closer. But this was light work for Asta, who would simply use these things as footholds for the sake of continuing his pursuit, as the intensity in his eyes was clear as day and as daunting as night. Yet once he got close enough, Lucifero would elevate an especially large piece of the ground up that would slam into Asta's side and bring him way up high. From which point we would receive a never before seen conversation between Asta's mother and Liebe. Here she would admit to him that she had a son, furthermore going on to say that he would have been around the same age as Liebe by now, which I find to be rather fascinating, as although Liebe's stature may have been smaller in the past, I never actually presumed Liebe's age to be proportionate to his outward appearance on account of him being a devil and all. She let it be known that she was incredibly thankful that her son had been born a healthy baby. We would then snap back to the current reality as Lucifero had leapt up to attack Asta, who he had suspended for the moment atop this massive block. But to continue the conversation from the past, Rachita would say that despite her happiness, had she remained with her son, she would have ended up stealing his life force, and so she had to leave him. And we then receive a shot of her leaving Asta at the orphanage, expressing that she is unfit to be a mother. And at that, I have to wonder how she managed to get pregnant in the first place with such a dangerous power to begin with, but I suppose that is a question for another day. Although there is the belief that Alan, the late best friend of the Dark Triad Xenon, could be his dad, especially on account of all the similarities, but as far as we know, he died and didn't possess any magic special enough for him to resist the draining of his life force. He simply had fire magic, what is a relatively basic sort of magic. Perhaps he may have actually survived and received treatment similar to Yami, where he ended up being more akin to a devil in composition than a human, but at least for right now, there's not really anything to substantiate such speculation. Subscribing to such a prospect right now wouldn't be all too different from the fact that at one point, some fans presumed Dante to be Asta's dad simply based on his devil marking. Lucifero in the present would slam his fist into the abdomen of Asta and attack with such ferocity that just about any other character would be impaled by it. Rachita in the past would look down at her hands as she struggled to admit that she'd never be able to be by his side, that she would never be able to hold him in her arms, that she'd never be able to see him ever again. But that wouldn't change the fact that tomorrow and all the days to come, always and forever, she would love her son. As Asta looked intensely at Lucifero locking eyes with the creature. And one might say that with this true devil union between Asta and Liebe, these memories from the past which we are observing now are events that Asta is now privy to. And so although he may not have known Rachita to be his mother as well when he declared his aggression towards Lucifero, he does now. And as he looked at Asta, Lucifero himself had a bit of recollection, as he would remember the face of Rachita in the past as she protected Liebe. And just like that, Lucifero would put two and two together, realizing that Asta was a child of the quote worthless woman who had gotten in the way of his manifestation into the mortal world in the past. And good lord, the expression on Asta's face here was absolutely diabolical. He'd swing his sword up towards Lucifero's face, slicing another one of his horns clean off. Lucifero would attempt to retaliate here by reeling back a fist, but Asta was more than ready for this. In a single move, he had now managed to cut off all of Lucifero's hands in brilliant fashion. The fiend's eyes now widened, yet Asta was not done just yet. Before the hands of the monster could even hit the ground, Asta would make another upward slash across him. And once again, Lucifero, this once proposed to be nightmarish figure of apocalyptic carnage, could only look on in horror himself as Asta let him know that the only one who was truly worthless was him, as he cleaved Lucifero in two like a hot knife to butter. But he still wasn't done, as he would cut into him yet again from another angle. And with that, Devil Union had met its time limitation, and as such, Asta and Liebe were promptly separated from one another, Liebe retaining his actual stature as opposed to his chibi version. The remains of Lucifero would then messily fall onto the ground in repulsive fashion, with the face of the royal kissing the dirt. Asta and Liebe would then say in union, still seeming to be somewhat mentally intertwined, that while Lucifero crawls on the ground, they are going to live and be happy, which is exactly what their mother desired of them. And oh my goodness, these boys look like absolute goons here together. Asta seriously needs to consider keeping his headband around his neck because this is too cool. Now, what comes next from here, I imagine, is going to be very make or break for a lot of fans. Reasonably speaking, our forces can't really handle much else. Everyone is spent and exhausted, so it's hard not to see this being the end of Lucifero. Yet if it is, my goodness, was he one of the most disappointing antagonists I have seen in Shonen in quite some time. I'm sorry, but this guy is horribly underwhelming and lame. Yes, he is the most powerful adversary we have seen thus far, but nothing about him was genuinely exceptional at all. Sure, he laid out every captain sent by the Clover Kingdom, but all he did was punch and kick them. And listen, in another series, hand-to-hand combat can be fantastic, but not with this guy, not in this series. There weren't any signs of martial arts prowess or anything like that. He just hits really hard and that's it. And for a series with such creative powers as Black Clover, I can't help but be disappointed. Even his use of gravity magic was boring. As opposed to using the magic in terrifying ways or anything like that, he just pushed and pulled and made rocks move. Which, don't get me wrong, can certainly be done to great effect in a story as seen by the likes of Pain from Naruto and such, but really, this just was not it. In fact, I'd go as far as to argue that his vessels, Morris and Dante, were more interesting in their application of his power. I mean, the sheer fact that they had two sorts of magic at their disposal was far more interesting. And because we seemingly look to be at the end here, I have to say how disappointing that truly is. I mean, Morris was a character, a mad scientist that has been hyped up since the very beginning of the story. Far longer than Lucifero, and with his hands in so many pies, he was essentially the Orochimaru of the Black Clover story. However, the speed to which he was thrashed by the Black Bulls was absolutely embarrassing. I mean, sure, for the moment it made the Bulls look really strong and really capable, but it was just downright disrespectful for the character that we have known to be such a villain from the very beginning. I personally found it to be far more fascinating, but you know what, whatever. Even if you don't want to use Morris, why is it that despite manifesting through Morris, Lucifero did not use his modification magic? I mean, come on, Vanica had blood magic, and Megecula used that to her advantage. She used not only that, but she also used the steel magic of Noel's mother on top of her curse magic, which was already so powerful. In regards to emotional stakes, yes, he is responsible for the suffering of Liebe and such, but he's so devilish that there's no part of him that's human. Do you understand what I mean? Like, there's nothing really to latch onto his character that's compelling in any way. Truthfully, the expenditure of the Dark Triad in exchange for these villains we have no history with, but are instead told are a big deal, may not have been the right choice. And you know, at that, although I will say that Megecula was a lot better than Lucifero turned out to be, because although I really like Vanica, Megecula brought something new to the table that had a different sense of gravity to it. I mean, simply put, she had more impact, not only in the fact that her magic was so extravagant, but the fact that she impacted the lives of Noel, Nozel, Charlotte, and Lolopechka. Meanwhile, yes, Lucifero was responsible for the death of Asta and Liebe's mother, but it was nothing personal. He didn't really even care about her. She was insignificant. He was kind of just seizing an opportunity that presented itself. Meanwhile, you have Megecula, who was definitely conniving, planning this behind the backs of the other Supreme Devils, planning this for years and years. Such a meticulous and well-orchestrated plan that makes the King of Devils look like an utter chump. I love Black Clover profusely and have championed this series for years and years since its first week of publication, and it is for those very reasons that I feel this arc, for as cool as it may have been visually and in regards to the power-based progression of our characters, was a miss. Although Magna did the damn thing, his fight was clean. That being said, I am still looking forward to the aftermath of all of this because it is Asta's recognition time. This boy saved the entirety of the Clover Kingdom from an ancient demon akin to the greatest feat that the first Wizard King had ever done, and did so in a matter of seconds when even the most seasoned of the country's active combatants could not. Not to mention the fact that he has now saved the entirety of the world from the King of Devils, Lucifero, the very figure that has laid out most of the Clover Kingdom's strongest mages single-handedly and simultaneously. Asta's power and words should be undeniable now, to the point where the trial against him sounds like a joke. Oh, and who can forget the ever-mysterious Adramelech, who is just waiting for his opportunity. Clearly, I am very opinionated about all of this, so I would love to know how you guys feel in the comments as well. Thank you all so much for watching, and have an awesome day. I love you.